Yep, Kate, you don't want to be in the front row. That's where all the geeks sit.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to present about the FES bike. So Joe and I talked about it, and I really think the FES bike is being utilized really well in the outpatient system, and so and in the inpatient system as well, but we kind of wanted to look at different models of how it could be utilized more often in the inpatient system. And so that's pretty much what my presentation is about. So my objectives today. The first question we want to address is, one, is it beneficial to use the FES bike in that acute population? So I went to the research and I found a couple studies, and I'll be going over a patient that had a spinal cord injury and another patient had a stroke, and that's who I got on the bike. And so I'll be discussing their cases as well and kind of how they responded to the bike and the treatments that we did. And then the second question is, if it is beneficial in the acute population, how do we implement it in this setting? So I'll kind of talk about some barriers I ran into trying to get this going, and then I'll talk about some potential options, and I kind of wanted to have a discussion so that we could talk through that. And then lastly, provide some tips and advice from an FES bike beginner. So just some things I learned in the process, getting patients on the bike, just some kind of small things I learned that I think might be beneficial. So the first patient I got on was a patient with a recent stroke. So both of these patients are from the inpatient rehab, the second floor. And so the research, when I went to the research, there really isn't much in acute populations for stroke. So the closest I could find, though, was a subacute, so less than 6 months post-stroke. And this was actually kind of an interesting randomized control trial. It was actually double-blind. Both groups of patients got on the FES bike. Just one patient wasn't stimulated while they were on it, and they told them, oh, you may or may not feel the stimulation, which is interesting. So, but that was how they did this. They did the model, and they had a ton of therapy. So 5 times a week they got on the bike for about 30 minutes a session. And then outside of that, they also did 3 hours of rehabilitation every day of the week. So pretty similar to our inpatient environment. The things they found with the FES bike group was that they improved in all kinds of things: overground gait speed, motricity index, upright motor control test, work produced on the paretic leg, as well as trunk control test. And they improved in all of those after the 4-week intervention. And those were all significant findings. In the placebo group, there weren't any significant findings at the post-test, but at the follow-up, like 2-3 weeks later, they had a couple significant findings, including gait speed and upright motor control test. So what that led the researchers to think is that there are more rapid improvements with the FES, which is kind of something I think some conversations have been had about, like moving up discharge dates and kind of just making progress more rapidly. And then the other big finding from this study was that the FES cycling did translate to improvements in overground gait speed. So I think those are 2 really important things, especially in functional mobility in these acute patients, that we kind of talk about. So the patient I got on the bike, he was a recent stroke. He was post-cardiac surgery. So the cardiac precautions kind of made the case a little more complicated, but he had multiple ischemic areas with the stroke, and his left side was definitely weaker. And so basically, I got him on the bike throughout his time here, which was about 1.5 weeks, 3 times per week for 30 minutes per session. I only set up his left side because I just wanted to draw attention to that side and increase the activation in those muscles. And then because of the cardiac precautions, because of the post-cardiac surgery, he had really low endurance. So we did interval training, which is another thing I'll talk about, that the interval training, how the bike has it preset, is not interval training how PTs think of interval training. It's set up for people who do not have volitional control of their muscles. So that's important to know when you're setting a patient up. The other interesting thing about him was that he had a ton of edema. So one modification I had to make while setting him up on the bike was to increase, his intensity was maxed out as much as I could get it, and so I had to increase his pulse duration, the pulse width, in order to increase the muscle activation, because there was just a lot of impedance with all the edema. And I'll talk about that. That's one of those things that you can modify for the patients that are on the bike. But he did really well. And these are just a lot of his numbers, a lot of data. He had a small, meaningful change in his 10-meter walk test. He nearly halved his 5 times sit to stand since the day of our first session. He was moving really well whenever I first started working with him, as you can tell from his spin scores. But I think the most significant thing that happened by discharge was how well his gait was doing. And he was even walking in the parallel bars with no assistive device. So, and the first day I saw him, he couldn't walk longer than 30 to 50 feet without needing a break. His knee was hyperextending. He was complaining of a lot of knee pain. And by the end, he was doing excellent. And I just thought that was really impressive. His discharge day was actually moved up by one day, and his lower extremity strength improved modestly, but not a ton. But I still think functionally he had great gains after using the bike. And I just wanted to put up his numbers. So this is the days, the output data from the bike that we put into the notes. I bolded the kind of significant things, which was how much his left lower extremity was able to push, and that increased from day 1 through 3. And on the last day, I wanted him to do 50-50 work to kind of work on that bilateral coordination piece. And that was really hard for him. But I was also able to increase the resistance, his work resistance, throughout his time on the bike. And he just did really well with that. And so I just thought his numbers looked really good, so I wanted to show those and how well he did. So this model that we used, I was fairly independent with his case. He had cardiac precautions, which made it a little more complicated, so I had to monitor those. But I think this is a more like student-driven model. Students can get them on the bike, students can set them up, and he was always up in his wheelchair. So I would just run in, grab him, run out, get him on the bike. I was only setting up one leg, so it didn't take that long. And then I just bring him right back to his room. So this was an extra hour outside of his therapies. So I kind of had to do some finagling with scheduling and fit in between nursing and social work visits, because our inpatients are very busy. They have really busy schedules, and that is something I learned through this process. So I think the next model, the one that I did with the patient with a spinal cord injury, might be more so the one we implement with techs. And I'll talk more about that. But I think that model might be a little more useful in this setting. So in terms of spinal cord injury, I actually did find a study where they did a 4-week research protocol in the acute setting. And that was really interesting. They got him on the bike 2 times a week for 4 weeks, did 45 minutes of therapy every day outside of those 2 days per week. And they found improvements in spasticity, walking ability, muscular reactivation, and it supported the circulatory processes. They didn't actually go into detail how that was, but mostly that their muscle circumference increased, and so through the process. And I think that was it on that slide. So the patient I got on the bike, on 3/8 we did her ASIA test, and she was a T11 complete spinal cord injury. I have been getting her on the bike for about 4 weeks now, and we, again, outside of normally scheduled therapy sessions as much as I possibly could, 3 times per week for 30 minutes a session. And we do bilateral channel setup, so quads, hamstrings, tibialis anterior, and gastroc. In the last couple of visits, we set up her glutes as well, and that increased the power output, and it was really cool to see. But we do continuous cycling with her at a very minimal resistance, and she responds well. The one thing that we kind of noticed in the first couple of sessions is she might have a possible peripheral nerve injury because the quads and the tibialis anterior really are not being stimulated by the stem, which kind of makes coming off of motor support really hard because quads and hamstrings are the main two pusher-pullers of the bike. So our goal was to get her off of the motor support, but it's difficult to do that if the quadriceps aren't really being stimulated. But we did a bunch of modifications to control speed, the intensity of her stimulation, again, the pulse duration, trying to increase motor recruitment to maximize power output and maximize her pedaling capabilities. So, kind of some significant events. She was retested on the Asia, and she moved to Asia B, and she has sensation down to L1 now. And actually, last time I got her on the bike, she could feel all the way down to her ankles. So that's totally different than the first day we got her on, where she couldn't feel past her belly button, pretty much. She also has trace and hip adductors and hip flexors coming in, and this is all not to say fairly common, but there are changes in the acute phase, is what I've learned, for spinal cord injuries. She did have some clonus and some spasticity coming in at her ankles, but I would test it before every session on the FES bike and then after, and it would always be gone after the session was over, after we got her on the bike. So, and I think that's just because it's working the muscles and fatiguing them, and the FES bike is known to decrease spasticity. So she did have bilateral DVTs about 3 weeks into our therapy sessions using the FES bike, which Dr. Kadian told her was kind of odd that she would have it kind of that late in the game. So I don't know if that's because we were using the bike and it kind of prolonged her ability to her circulatory processes and improved that and kind of delayed the DVTs. I don't really know. But her data wasn't super definitive. It didn't look as awesome as the patient with the stroke. So I didn't really go over that. I kind of just put what an average day looked like because her numbers were kind of all over the place. But I think the most important thing to bring up in her situation is that she loves getting on the bike. Like I said, our inpatients are super busy, and I would go in on the day that we would get her on the bike, and I'd be like, hey, do you want to come at 10? I'll come and get you. We'll get on the bike. And she was always like, yes, I definitely do, no matter how busy her day was. She really loved being able to feel that her muscles were working. She said her legs hurt less. She said it kept her legs stretched. And my favorite quote was, it was an extra tool that gives you another chance. So I really think the bike just gives, especially these in the acute setting, a lot of hope. And they can feel their muscles working, and the research is there to say it supports a lot of different aspects for recovery and rehabilitation. And so I think this was really critical to her care plan and to her success and how well she's doing. So this was a more complex case. Kind of the model we used here was that her primary PT and I worked together for the first 3 sessions. So for the first week, we got her on the extra hour outside of therapy services. And that was just kind of to set her up, get her going, make sure everything was going fine. And then every now and again, we would chat about how the sessions were going, any changes I had made, anything I was doing differently on the bike. And so I think this model might be a little more feasible in terms of utilizing technicians or students, so that there is communication with the primary PT and kind of like working them into the process, while also getting the patients on the bike fairly regularly and often. A possibility that I discussed was maybe moving the bike for increased supervision. I don't know, Joe and I kind of talked about this, and I don't know how feasible that would be, but just so that other people can kind of oversee if it is like a tech or a student on the bike with the patient. And so it's just something to think about, something that I wanted to bring up. Okay, so tips and tricks. So the 12-channel setup, this is really important. You have to pick this when you're setting the patient up online beforehand, because if you don't pick it, you're going to get on the bike and you're going to be super confused and it's going to look really weird. And you're going to panic and have to be running back and forth in between rows and trying to figure that out. But so 12-channel setup is like at the top of the list whenever you're setting a patient up online with their online ID. Like I already said, interval training is not interval training how we think about it, so have to make that modifications. It's like 8 and 12 minutes or something like that is how it's set up on there, and the resistance is crazy high.
It's designed to prevent someone with a motor complete injury from fatiguing and falling and requiring motor support. So it's 8 minutes of training with 2 minutes of passive cycling for the muscle to recover, and then 8 minutes of training again, and 2 minutes of passive cycling. But the way the machine manages the resistance, if that force generation is low, it will drop the resistance down. And when you've got someone that is physically capable of pedaling it volitionally, that resistance fluctuates up and down because it's just not consistent. So you do have to adjust those parameters.
Yep.
And recreate those intervals where one is a work load, one is a recovery load.
All that. So that was a great learning moment for me. So the 2 and 2 minute intervals, Joe was there and helped me set that up on that patient, on the patient with the stroke. And that was just ideal for him. That worked really well. There are a lot of options for modification on the bike. Some basic ones are modifying the resistance, modifying the control speed, and the intensity, obviously. But once you max out on intensity and the patient has a lot of impedance, like the patient with the stroke who had a ton of edema, you can modify the pulse width and increase that to get a more effective muscle contraction if you aren't happy with the muscle contraction at that point. Palpating for contraction can be really tricky. I have definitely learned that because the patient is moving and some muscles might be firing and other muscles might not be. And so there is a feature on the bike where you can muscle test the muscle, which I did with the patient with a spinal cord injury. I muscle tested her tibialis anterior and her quadriceps, and we got nothing on the tibialis anterior, and something was contracting when I tested the quadriceps, but I'm not sure what it was. It wasn't the quads. I think it might have been hip flexor. But that is an option that you can do, just because it's hard to palpate and be like, is it really contracting when they're actually moving and the bike cycling them? So that's another important thing. And then I'll talk about this a little bit on the next one, utilizing nursing for efficiency. So the barriers I kind of bumped into, scheduling is a huge barrier. And because what I was doing was kind of pro bono services, we didn't want to put it on the bike and then somebody who is paying for that service be bumped off the schedule. And so I just had to look at the PT schedule, PT, OT, and speech schedule, and see what that patient had on their schedule for the day, match it up with the bike schedule, and match it up with my schedule, and get them on the bike. And so that was just crazy. And if anybody else had been trying to do what I was doing, it would not have worked. Like if there were 2 people trying to get people on the bike outside of therapy services, it would have been crazy. I definitely think if this is the model we implement, that we get patients on outside of the bike, outside of their therapy services for an extra hour, there absolutely has to be a second bike for that purpose, because how busy the bike is right now and how busy the inpatients are, it's just kind of crazy. And so I really think that would be a really important to address that barrier that I bumped into very frequently. Nursing was sometimes like when they did their calf emptying changes because they were trying to get in between therapy sessions, and so was I, and so I bumped into that issue a couple times. But I learned that you could kind of use nursing to facilitate the process as well. So I would just tell my patient with a spinal cord injury, I'd be like, call nursing, this is what time I'm coming to get you, 25 minutes before that, put your call light on, they'll help you get out of bed, get into the wheelchair, and then I would just be able to run in, grab her, and run out and put her up on the bike. And just because her setup process took longer, because it was just me setting up all 8 channels on both legs, that just took a while. So that really helped facilitate this. Another thing is patient tolerance. Sometimes I'd get patients on in the morning, sometimes I would get them on in the afternoon, and it really varied how well they were able to do with the bike depending on their therapy sessions beforehand, and I didn't want to wear them out because then they had therapy sessions in the afternoon, and so that kind of played into some of how I set the bike up and things we did. But yeah, that's kind of the barriers I bumped into. So now I kind of just want to talk about it. I feel like I addressed question 1. I looked at the research, and the FES bike I think is really beneficial in the acute population, and I saw great success, and both the patients loved getting on the bike. And so the research I think is there to kind of support this process and support it happening. And so question 2, if it is beneficial, how should it be implemented? I think that's kind of where discussion comes in and getting y'all feedback and what people think. The PTs that I've worked with maybe could comment on that. The primaries, and kind of talking about that aspect. So, and I have references if you guys want. But I thought this could kind of be like a point where we kind of talk about it, and I got feedback on what you guys thought and could discuss the implementation.
Well, I know the bike, I mean, it's, we say it's busy, and it is, it's really busy on many days, but there are some gaps and practice patterns where the bike is not busy on Friday afternoons at all. Today it has 2 people on it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think it ebbs and flows. I think we've discussed a number of options for a much more restricted scheduling process for the bike, but there's a lot of barriers to that as well. So, I mean, when we talk about outpatient services, when we talk about inpatient services, and then when we talk about independent services, now we're talking, I mean, independent can't even begin to become realized until we have another bike. So, I mean, that just depends on whether that's a vision of ours or not. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to inpatient and outpatient, you're right, that balance of finding time and making sure that schedules are appropriate for that is a big challenge, which has resulted in us just kind of having a free-for-all scheduling setup. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I think it's the kind of thing that if you knew you wanted a patient to do this, you wanted the stimulation therapy, it's going to be hard to do it day by day. I think it's something that they put together, just like they do your scheduling. The first 2 days of anyone's schedule when the patient gets here, you need hard to put together. But after that, it starts opening up, and people just try to schedule open up. Find spots. But what happens is some of those outpatients might not block at all. I can't do my I mean, that's, until we get to that point, I don't think we can talk about a second bike though. Yeah, that's massive do that.
It also seems like we need to show that, okay, so we took it 1 day off this person's stay, we need to have a track record of, and we have districts that do this 2 days off this person's stay, or 4 days off of this person's stay, and turn that into, monetize that. This bike saved us $10,000 this week.
Yeah.
It seems like we would put in some of that deeper analysis to the patient itself too.
Is that possible? Or you think that would be used? Yeah.
You would just have to, I mean, you just have to look at a couple cases and hang your hat on. Scientifically, it's fairly good.
No. Well, I mean, and there's other places out there that have had the opportunity to do RCTs, things like that. So we're not big enough to do that kind of stuff. I get what you're saying. I think that would be ideal. I just think it's
I mean, the cost
10 years from now, we would probably have
or
a justification.
the cost of it, they were sitting in the stretch here, we use like X amount of consistency, they have to be observed with each day.
We've done 2 clients in 3 months. So that's our volume. 6 clients a year.
Right, no, we have to start increase that.
Right.
So Anna, we have a patient, who else?
Mine was a patient. I mean, he wasn't overly fatigued. He was, I mean, again, I think it was part of, I think it helped just that idea of we are building. You know, I mean, it was just one of the things like, you know, first we couldn't do the stuff that he was building, so I think it just set up that what we want, which is we're building, we're getting better, we're doing more. And it was one of the important pieces, I think, for that.
But it was always extra therapy, right?
Right, and I never felt like it was more fatigue or anything. It didn't interfere with my job as primary. It was a good adjunct and a very helpful thing.
And then the other thing, I mean, you think of all the stuff as far as what are, you know, with the accountable care organization that's lower costs, improved outcomes, improved value. So I mean, patient satisfaction is really good, that's really what patients feel like they're doing that. So you schedule people,
I was
right?
just gonna chime in that I think this would be so valuable because it has been so quick and so, it's been a really hard challenge, trying to incorporate for efforts from really incorporating the bike in my general treatment plan. I think I feel so like that tool is just sitting there, you know, calling to me with these folks with, you know, some dense braces, and it was really, it's been very hard to get it. Like I feel like in the end, we are like almost losing some of that primary need tailored therapy because I'm spending so much time setting them up on like almost like I thought for my next plan I'm gonna try to schedule more therapy. So I can do a ADL session that day and FES bike. So I was trying to do like 3 days a week, 2 to 3 on the bike, and then 2 to 3 you know, more self-care type tasks. And it was hard to accomplish those goals. So I think that having this will be really, really valuable to be able to get the basics covered, safety from home, all that kind of stuff. The scheduling was hard, but doable. You know, I was able to get, I would just, you know, move up to Amy, you know, 3 days a week on the bike. I was able to hit that most of the time, but then with the diversity of their schedules, they would get bumped or a schedule change and someone didn't feel what was supposed to that FES bike. So it was complex.
It is, I mean, it is complex when it's scheduling.
Yeah.
The bike is a person. You know, it's like, you have to schedule people for therapists, for patients session. So there's, you know, it's several more hoops to jump through for the schedule.
So you don't think too though, even if you're going to introduce it to a patient, it gives us a tool as outpatient therapists, and it brings them to us as outpatient therapists, because we're able to have just so more.
Yeah.
It's true.
You know, another thing we can, I mean, I think we could solve this a lot of different ways. We could do for inpatient that is 8 to 9 in the morning, breakfast, or 4:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. It's all inpatient, or inpatient. Patients only lunch or dinner at 5:30. You know, and someone would have to punch your schedule, and maybe the FES person sometimes that schedule is a 9:30 to 6 schedule or something. In inpatient therapy. I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff that's set in stone. We can problem solve this
Yeah, good. And for in the
we work with outpatient too, like with all the specialized equipment. So usually it was like, our schedule is new, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, inpatient, afternoons, outpatient, that morning. And then that was also a good way to show it's filled up, and I mean, then like the outpatients, they don't get all spread apart from there, they know that they come, it's always busy Monday, Wednesday, Friday morning, and then inpatient knows exactly when they can use it. I don't know if that would help fill inpatient into the schedule easier than finding, oh, well, they have, the outpatient on the bike at all these random times, so it's only open from 10 to 11, but wait, they have speech, I can't make speech, like if they're doing way to block it more like that, and maybe not a full afternoon morning thing, but like it's, and it comes down to if we want to use it on inpatient, and there's of course, patients will benefit from it, except that it's way just used, yeah, we don't want it sitting there, but I think that helps the schedule piece, because it was, I would say, lots of patients.
Did you guys have an expert, FES expert, or did?
No, I mean, the aides and techs did a lot of like going to get the patient, have them down there, if they set up enough pushes, like they know, infection go down, get the tabs out, and then they are that model, etc. I mean, definitely the spinal cord injury push, they use the bike the most, so they would consider experts of the bikes, but anybody should be like
Okay, for OT, we let them know. For OT, they had, Nicola, she was just the one there that was working with it and vision. It was
You were saying that if you had a client that you wanted to use the bike with, and I think Steve has set up one of the other clinicians who can online.
Well, yeah, I mean, like if we hadn't been trained up on it, we would just do like a code percent.
Oh.
There, but like the initial setup, like, you would help it set up, once the person set up the thing, or, we all should have to put that down, and get into the application for the technician. Yeah, it seemed to, obviously, because it was still tough there, and they had 3 of them, so. Different, but, I think you just showed it when you recorded it, both forward that way on both sides, instead of just like, something, but then efficiently switch to thoughtful, plus when it's on discharge days.
Yeah.
On inpatient, of course, time trying to use it. So,
I think it requires some flexibility in that case because, if you did like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday outpatient, Tuesday, Thursday inpatient, you'd have to, sometimes people would have to have someone else do the outpatient. If they didn't have an opening at that time for that patient. My schedule is such that my outpatients love very specific times, and there's other times that they just absolutely can't come. And then so they don't. I have a lot of population that can't make it more. I think we just have to be right. Or certain times. We're struggling, right now we're struggling with a situation where people are being booked on a half-hour month because, and that's just an example of, so it's like there's this half hour of downtime and then we've got another patient started and it's like, well, that basically affects a 2-hour window unless you can squeeze people in. We were able to, Abby and I were able to quickly turn 2 people over. Was that yesterday? So I had them on for 30 minutes. 2 days ago. I had them on for 30 minutes and pulled them off and rolled them out of the way while Abby brought her client on. So we got it done. We did 2 people in 65 minutes, basically. So, you have to be incredibly efficient and have the resources to make that happen. People we set up, we have to have resources. So there's a lot of potential, I guess was the point I'm trying to get at. There's a lot of potential opportunities. I think we just need to identify barriers and kind of knock them down. The shorts? I think they're just set. I don't know. I haven't explored them. But, yeah, which I think, that's a huge reality for a lot of people. Well, 2 things. One is every, once a year people come in for basically a 20 session cycle. Two is, and when we were first looking for the bike, I met with the president of the Idaho Elks, and he's friends with the gentleman who has a spinal cord injury, and says that the reason that this was so near and dear to him was because that individual was, wherever he would go for vacation, he would always make sure that there was a bike accessible to them. So like when he goes to Phoenix, and he knows exactly where to go, and he goes and cycles for 2 or 3 days a week, independently. So and that's what they actually look at that with him and his wife. They're an older couple that travels a lot. And that's one of the things when they identify a place that they want to go to is, does it have a bike, I think. So, which you think is quite restricted, but. You're not going to zombies. Right. Anyway.
Thanks, y'all. What?
I don't know. Well, hold on.
Thank you.